Welcome to this bonus episode of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast covering Marvel Studios Assembled, the making of X-Men 97. I'm JC, and in celebration of a season complete for us, I'm having a Guinness.
Ooh, nice. That looks yummy. It's the canned one, too.
Yeah, it's got the little hopper bouncing around inside stuff, too. I figured that was really good audio texture to open it right next to the microphone.
That's awesome. I would drink, but I've had a long day. I'm at the age where drinking after a long day would make it worse.
Old Man Rod is my favorite.
And I'm Rod, and I just noticed there's a lot of colons in that title.
Yep. Yes, there are.
Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode we can find. The podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men the animated series that built up to the first season of X-Men 97. I don't know if we ever thought about this side of the show.
I only started thinking about it as we were reading that part of the script last week. That was literally the first time I started thinking of, I have to change stuff on all of our socials.
Right. Oh, that's why I got the notification that the Facebook page changed.
Yeah, the Facebook page had to change its name. Yep.
Because at first I saw before I saw what it was, I was like, oh shit, we were one of the Facebook hacks.
No, that was me. I should have warned you.
No, then I saw what it was, and I was like, oh, okay, that seems right. Everyone I know has gotten their Facebook page stolen somehow through the weirdest, and these are smart people, through the weirdest ways. So anyway, that makes sense. Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that concluded over a week ago. There will be spoilers for the show. If you haven't watched it by now, don't watch Assembled yet either, because that also spoils things.
Yeah. We'll get into that when we get into the actual stuff, but yes.
Yeah. And if you don't want to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. It is a bit longer, just a heads up, because it's the making of the whole show. It's like a little under an hour. We're currently not sponsored by or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus in any way.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Twitter, and Facebook. Although I really don't post on our threads as much as I should. Who knows? I'll try.
Whatever.
Of course, make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast services. Now, on to the show. Rod and I talked a little bit about this before we got into it. We are kind of doing this as a little more of a free-form thing to just kind of talk about what stood out to us from this making of. I think it will, and I'm going to jinx us, hopefully not, but I think this is the one episode we do where our episode is going to be shorter than the actual thing we're talking about. That will be the first for us.
I think so, too, because we messaged each other right after watching it last night and kind of had the similar consensus. And this is coming from a couple guys that rewatched the entire original show and live in the town where most of the actors are and got to attend the rap party. And so, so there is a bit of not bias, but stuff that isn't, in the context of most viewers. But we messaged each other, wow, that felt like it was produced and edited by a lawyer, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just wow, you could just tell that there was things that were danced around and left out, and then most of the stuff was oh, we already knew that, or a quarter of those people interviewed we had here,
right?
So
there were absolutely stories that were shared that we either got from the person directly, it came from one of the making of books from the Leewalds, or we had seen it in passing at conventions and stuff like that. So I do want to say I absolutely appreciate that they finally gave a spotlight to Larry and the Leewalds for the original series. Because I think that's one of the big pieces of the history of the show, that if you're not going out and getting the books, and I mean, transparently, affiliate links in the description of this podcast to see those books, but there's a lot of the history that's unknown. And Rod is seen where I've gone to bat, because in some of these Facebook fan groups, people are kind of talking out of their asses in some cases of, oh, this was meant to be XYZ. And it's no, that's literally just internet rumor. Here's what has been said by the people who made this show.
Yeah. And I also liked how, this was the first official Disney acknowledging the dynamic between Larry and the Leewalds.
Yeah.
And I think Larry even said it specifically. He was like, those guys didn't know anything about X-Men, but knew how to write great drama. I didn't know how to write drama, but knew way too much about X-Men, so it was the perfect balance. I was like, yeah, that seems right. And you said it in a simple, clean elevator pitch.
I did love how he also pointed out that back then there was the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which I think today they were just that's our website with poorly written wiki entries, There
was also probably half the amount of characters, to their credit.
Dude, I remember when those were coming out, as an aside, they were printed in a different style of book. They actually were meant to be like perforated and cut out, and they had 3-hole punches already built into the pages. So it might not be this, because there were versions that had that and versions that did not. But most of my Marvel handbook was cut out and put into binders. Granted, I probably cost myself hundreds of dollars in the long run by doing that, because I can't resell single pages from that. But that was like a whole thing.
You know, now that you say that, I might have gotten one of those from like a book fair. I definitely I saw someone post this in one of the groups. I definitely had like Where's Waldo X-Men thing. It's not Where's Waldo, but you know, the same thing where you find the characters and stuff. There's only one of
Where's
them.
Wolvie?
Yeah, that would have been great if that was what it was called.
It probably wasn't, sadly.
But yeah, so that was good. Although, like you said, anybody if you've already listened to our show, you heard almost everything, but maybe 2 or 3 things that the Leewalds said on there. Mm-hmm. There was only 1 or 2 things that I was like kind of not surprised, but was like, oh, that's new information.
Well, the certain ones, like the mention of all the fan mail, that was something that it was in the book. Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the Leewalds getting as much attention as they are right now in recognition for what they did, 30 years ago. I did love during the end credits, you actually noticed they had the camera zoomed back a little bit. And on Eric's lap was the original book that they did. And then on Julia's lap was the other book that they did. The one that had more of the art assets and stuff like that inside of it.
Yeah, I love the hustle. Because even in the shots, in both at the credits and in the actual episode, they were wearing like their own merch.
The previously on. Yeah.
Larry, I don't know. We've only seen him at conventions, and we haven't had him on the show yet. So maybe he's just like this normally, but I love that he got this chance to be on camera on a Disney thing. He just like get geeked out. He seemed like he was 16 all over again.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of my favorite interactions with Larry was in San Diego at Comic-Con one year, and in front of me in line was somebody who had the cover of G.I. Joe number 300.
Oh, nice.
And it was a splash cover that had every single character on it. And because Larry had done so much work with G.I. Joe as well, like he had not seen it in person yet. He had only probably seen like a file online or something, because it got released essentially at San Diego. And him going through and literally picking out every individual character and stuff like that, it was something that was so honest and pure. That's the kind of creative people I want to support, because they love what they're doing. And it's not like the guy cutting that you're just doing it to get a check,
Yeah. There was even a little bit of B-roll that they still had audio under, and I think most people might have missed it, but like he was talking to Jake and Emmy, I think, about some of the episodes, and he just pointed at the shot, and I think Emmy had asked something like, and what was this decision here? And he was like, listen, we didn't have time, I had to get it done. And I was like, I love it. I love the honesty.
No. So let's talk about the people that we do see in this. From the production side, Brad Winterbottom, who is an executive producer on it, he is credited as pitching to Kevin Feige as, we need to do this show. And I interpret that very specifically as, we need to do this as the continuation of the original X-Men, not him pitching the concepts of the episode. And then Dana Vasquez Eberhardt, who is also one of the executive producers, co-executive producer, I think is the title that she's presented by, which, quick note, nobody's listed at the credits on the IMDb of the assembled episode at all.
I pulled it up just so I have some of the names of reference. I'm like, oh, there is no credits.
No. Just for a little bit of context, Brad was also a part of Thor Ragnarok on the original Ant-Man movie, and then also on Hawkeye. So obviously I have to give support to anybody who worked on Hawkeye. Dana was a part of What If and I Am Groot.
Okay.
And then we have Jake, of course, who transparently Rod has known for a minute. I only recently got to meet Jake in person at WonderCon, and I love Jake's intro of talking about the Pizza Hut video.
Yes, because that's so I can talk about this now. When I met Jake years ago, it was at a bar, NoHo, and we were drinking and hanging out with some mutual friends. That was something that was like super relatable, because I also discovered the show that way. Because if we probably saw it, me and my brother probably saw it on TV, but we really got to love it through the Pizza Hut video with the trading card and everything. Because there's some, I don't even know like how that happened. We probably saw that done commercial on TV and like begged our parents to go, and I don't even know how much that tape costs. But same way. So I think for a lot of kids, that was the point of origin.
Yep. And for those who don't know, Jake had also worked on Batman Unlimited and Reign of Superman as animated features that he had been a part of. We had Jeremy Holger, who is the animation supervisor, worked on the Cuphead animated show that was on Netflix.
Oh, nice.
Teen Titans Go. And then Rod, the one that I think you would have appreciated, he was a part of one of the Mortal Kombat Legends animated projects.
Oh, do you know which one?
I didn't write down beyond what that threshold. It got to the colon as like Mortal Kombat Legends.
Yeah. That was great. But all of those are like really good. So yeah, that's great.
We had Chase Conley, who was one of the directors, who I unfortunately didn't recognize his name, but when I IMDb'd him, he was a part of Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and that is probably one of my other favorite animated things from the last 5 years easily. So
yeah, I wasn't familiar with Chase before this assembled episode, but I really liked the energy he brought in his interviews of his perspective of what they needed to bring into the show.
Yep. And we have Emmett Unamura, who's also one of the directors. They had worked on The Killing Joke, which is an epic Batman story, but also from the digital world, they worked on Genlock, which was one of those major productions that Rooster Teeth had done in their heyday. It was the one that was like big 3D mecha fights and stuff like that. So
gotcha. Okay, so that explains some of the attention to the action and stuff then, I guess. That's so cool. Yeah, it's such a dream team behind the scenes even.
And then from the character design team and head of visuals was Ryan Maynardug. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Ryan. But he had been a part of the original Iron Man team in the art department.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like early Marvel Studios as a part of this. So,
so they really scouted out like the right talent to bring the show to life. It's funny when Brad opens up the episode talking about like when Disney Plus started, he pitched to Kevin Feige like, yeah, this should be one of your first things. I'm actually kind of surprised that this wasn't like the flagship Marvel streaming thing, because it sounds like the most obvious thing. Like, great decision on Brad's part to pitch that. But it sounds like the most obvious thing, right? Like, this was probably the biggest animated thing from Marvel before.
I feel like it's one of those it is and it isn't, because as successful as we know this is considered, I believe it technically still has had less viewership than Echo has at this point.
97? Oh, okay. Well,
If you look at it from the perspective of minutes spent watching, and granted, Echo has had more time for views to accumulate, and we know a lot of people have been waiting for 97 to end so they could binge the entire thing. So I believe it will change by the end of the year. Yeah. But animation does not perform at the same level of live action. So a successful animated show could be considered like mid-tier performance for a live action show. I mean, even look at like Into the Spider-Verse, like that thing is a massive success, but if you look at it from a numbers perspective, it's like a tenth of what, No Way Home did, for example.
Gotcha. Yeah, did I read something that was incorrect? It said something like 97 was like the third most streamed thing on Disney Plus?
No, that was correct. It was
pretty high though.
Percy Jackson was number 1, Echo was number 2, and this is number 3 for viewership by percentage in this year.
Gotcha. I mean,
it's still crushing it. No doubt.
I was going to say, I feel like that's still like, so you release a show that got people to subscribe for 3 months. That's pretty good, right?
And then I reposted today, Lenore had shared it on her Instagram. It was basically saying that the finale has racked up 3.5 million viewers in the final episode. So, I mean, I don't think that many people are going and watching the last episode without having watched the first episode. So you could kind of say, in a fair estimate, it's got to be close to 3.5 million views per episode across the board, and especially in such an episodic series.
I'm fact checking here. Okay. So I think Lenore posted, but also Allison Seeley Smith posted that like the series bumped up again to 100%. But I'm looking at it now.
I did see that as well.
I'm looking at it now, it's back down to 99, but I feel like it's going to, as more reviews start coming out by the final episode, it's going to kind of bounce back and forth. But once again, still...
If you're over 95, if you're that far above 95, you're not dropping below it. So, yeah.
Especially for a show that it feels like it had so much going against it, because if you weren't a fan, this would be easy to scrutinize, right? And then if you were a fan, this was probably the highest of expectations out of returning material.
We literally dedicated how many hundreds of hours of our lives over the last 2 years to do this, So if anybody was invested in, please don't let it be bad. Like, we were definitely in that. I'm not going to say we were the 1%, but we were in the top 5%, I would say. Or
I think I had commented on a post that I think you replied to, and then I saw it in my feed or whatever, because this person was like arguing with you that like popularity is not a good metric for good writing.
That was in the infamous X-Men Facebook group.
Yeah. Yep. And there's a reason I'm not in there all that often, but this one came across my feed the right time. That particular night I was tired and feeling petty. But also my friends who know me know that I'm not ever like out looking for stuff, but the way my head works is like when like math doesn't math, I'm just like, well, I'm just trying to see what you're seeing here because this doesn't math. So I think you were saying basically
my argument was somebody was saying the fault of the show was not having good writers. And my argument was you cannot find me a piece of media that has hit both with critics and with audiences that is considered to be bad writing.
Yeah. And then this person was basically saying, like, well, they like went so far off the comic books or whatever that it's bad writing and popularity is not a good metric. And I was like, that math doesn't math to me, because if you're saying like the skill of a writer is based on how well they can copy a previous medium into a new one, then I would be a genius if I just took a comic book and took the word bubbles and put it into a screenplay format.
Right.
But if you can take something from another medium into a separate one where critics agree up to 99% and fans agree to 95%, having a generally positive experience, that seems like a more skilled writer to me.
Right, because here's what we see in modern media. We see in modern media, usually there is a separation between what the critics are liking and what the average viewer is liking. So you'll get things like, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but something like Godzilla versus Kong, that will have a generally low critic score because they're saying it's like lowbrow cinema, etc., but it will have a great fan score. And then on the opposite side, you get to some of, you know, your indie darling, like award-winning movies that will have a very high critic score, but a middling audience score, because for the most part, people don't give a shit about it, and it's liked by the artiste, but not by the general consumer. So for me, my argument is, well, if you hit both, you're doing something great.
Yeah. And also, you know, my friend Shani, who we mentioned last episode, is supposed to be on the show multiple times.
Yeah, 2025. We'll get her on when season 2 debuts.
So she finally started watching 97. She's told me I had so many recommendations for her. She's like, I can't keep up. I was like, forget all of them. 97 is the closest to objectively perfect as you can get. And I think you will specifically enjoy this because it's so good to everybody. But also just trust me. So she finally started watching with her partner the other night. She called me in between every single episode. Yeah. And just for a little context, Shani has a podcast with a friend of hers that they read romance novels. Yeah. And so she's like, wait, like Storm got shot? I was like, yeah, keep watching. And then like she called me back like 15 minutes later. She's like, what? Like, why is Jean there? Did Cyclops impregnate Morph? I was like, no, there's 2 Jeans. She's like, what? It's like, they're secret babies. She's like, they're secret babies. I told you you're going to love the show. I think a couple hours later, she's like, I always love Magneto. I was like, well, hang on, because you're getting ready to see BDSM Magneto here in a little bit. So there's something for everybody in this show. It's a good transition into like kind of the elephant in the room. For one of my criticisms of Assembled, it's a great show. I'm not trying to like, you know, yuck anybody's yum who like made this or who enjoyed it, because I saw a lot of people enjoy the Assembled, especially a general audience who aren't used to seeing behind the scenes stuff. But one of my criticisms was, for as much as they praised the writing of the show, they didn't show any of the writers.
Yeah, nobody from the entire writing team. And here's the thing, going into it, I absolutely did not expect to see Bo mentioned. Realistically, knowing that he had parted ways with the company, I was not expecting it. And I think anybody expecting it, candidly, that was a little bit foolish on their part. Yeah. But you have multiple other writers who were a part of the series. Like, you know, my friend Charlie, who I've mentioned in the past. And there are other writers who were either co-writers on episodes or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it felt weird that the writing and the sophistication of the writing was focused on by everybody from the, you know, the voice actors to the team making it on, you know, the producing and directing side. It just felt like it was omitted. And I gotta imagine it was, well, if we show any other writer and we don't show Bo, that's going to look worse than if we just don't show any writers at all. Yeah. That's kind of my guess on it.
I got that too. It's hard for me to believe that none of them would not have addressed any of them by name. So it feels like that was an editorial thing, like where all the interviews are kind of like, oh, like they cut out because like you said, Charlie, as much as like Bo deserves credit for being like the concept of all the outline of what we loved and stuff, it was definitely
he was the showrunner. Yeah, absolutely.
But the team made all that. You don't get 10 perfect episodes without a great team.
I mean, candidly, the one thing I got out of this that we missed from a lot of the stuff that's been going on in Los Angeles is like, we didn't get Chase or Emmy, etc., like seeing them at these events and stuff like that. Because like looking back, I'm like, were they somebody who was at Scum with us? And I don't remember ever seeing them unless they literally ducked into a corner. Like Jake is one of the only ones from the production side that we've seen at these events. So
and he was only on the last one.
Right. But I also did see him, like I said, at the WonderCon panel. And
oh, that's right. Yeah. And so that's a little bit of a shame because once again, like the writing, is the foundation for everything we loved about this show. And to me, it was kind of like unjust that the mailroom lady from Fox in the 90s got named first and last name.
Right.
But the writers of the current show did not.
Yeah. And then there's kind of the other elephant in the room with omission. I don't think we need to dwell on it, but it was weird that there was literally no mention of Saban anywhere because Saban's team was such a major part of that original series. Mm-hmm. We got Avi Arad, but we never got Saban. And with never getting Saban, we also didn't get Ron Wasserman. I thought that was a shame. Although we did get the screenshot of Jubilee and Sunspot running out of Assermans. So
yeah, that's right. That's what was weird too, is like that had been a slip up on the editorial, right? Because you didn't mention Ron, and then it showed the Easter egg, or someone in editorial snuck it in because they're like, "Fuck these guys,"
Or they purposely used the Asserman version as opposed to the Wasserman version.
Yeah, and.
I love that one of the first screen grabs that Ron saw was the Asserman version and not the one where his full name was shown.
Because that's the one I sent him because I didn't actually notice the first one, the exterior. But Ron said I was the first one that messaged him about it.
Good.
Also because it was 1 a.m. But
that poor man, like I can't imagine, like if I look at the history of your text with him, it's like, when does Rod shoot Ron a note?
Right.
Well, yeah, of course you're the first one.
But so they had to have talked about the music because of the theme song.
It's in the conclusion during the end credits.
Yeah. Oh my God, that thing. Yeah. But see, and I feel like the end credits thing was kind of like a Hail Mary because it was like, it's there, but not really. It was there, but all of it was incorrect. And God love all these people because a couple of them are singers, but then they mixed them with 90% non-singers. Everybody tried their best. So it's like a plausible deniability kind of thing, I guess, with song play. And now they did play the song in the middle a little bit, but it's like they had to address it, but you almost could feel the breath of the legal team behind like that section because it was so brief.
There's literally somebody off camera as they're talking about it that has a notepad that they're like, they're like, okay, the pen's not moving. I'm okay. Yeah. I'm okay. Oh, the pen's moving. Shit, I have to pull it back.
Because the more I think about it, it makes sense because Disney has to know that whatever they put in this assembled is going to be referenced by every YouTuber, social media person, whatever. So they just want to be really careful what they come out and say. And, legally, if anybody doesn't know for whatever reason, Saban and Shuki Levy are technically credited for writing the theme song, but that's just the way business works. I'm currently in a lot of work for hire stuff where like I work on music, but whoever is like the executive, that they're the ones credited, and that's what we agreed to. I'm not being cheated at anything. And actually, Ron's the one that kind of put me on that path, or he didn't put me on the path. He encouraged me to like not be afraid of it.
Yeah.
And so it's its own separate deal, but I'm sure that would have been like a lot for them to have to like navigate in the middle of a making of.
Right. And then especially because Saban is not formally a part of anything that has to do with Disney right now. Yeah. And it's glaring when you know about it because obviously we know Ron, and then from being at the event during the finale, getting to know one of the Newton brothers and stuff like that. So it wasn't just like we left out the historical composer. They literally didn't even talk about the Newton brothers, who did an amazing job with music for the entire season too.
Yeah.
Nothing is addressed for, the needle drops and anything that happened in the season, aside from, the story Larry gives about how he matched up the original storyboards for the intro to what he said was roughly, I think he said it was like the 13th draft of the song he had gotten from Ron, and obviously not mentioning Ron's name. So
yeah, which to his credit, that does sync up with accounts from all the way around. And actually, I guess we can link stuff in the description, right?
Yeah, you just have to send it to me.
We might as well, you know the video is the one we did with NerdSync. I actually wrote the script, and that's where all of us first met Ron, was that interview. Ron tells a story about that, about having to do so many iterations for Saban and Larry.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure he said something around 12 or 13. And granted, one of those was just to add the gong at the end, or the bell at the end. But I mentioned this to you and another friend last night. The way that they cut it together, I feel like if you were an outsider looking in, you might have thought that Larry wrote the song.
So because you mentioned that to me, when I did my rewatch, I paid specific attention to it. I didn't get that vibe personally. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's like anybody's perspective is incorrect, but I didn't read it that way for what it was worth.
Just because he was the one narrating it, and then he just kept talking about when the music was done, but it was like, by who? We just talked about the mailroom lady from the 90s. Who was the music team? Like,
why don't you like this woman from the mailroom?
No, she seems great. It was just so bizarre that they left in her first and last name, and then we got nothing from the writers of the music team. And like you said, the Newton brothers. Yeah, we got to meet Andy from the Newton brothers at the rap, and he was great. And you know, him and Ron got to catch up and stuff, or meet actually. And talk about some of the music and talk shop and stuff. And I was kind of looking forward to hearing them talk about the Storm theme, because for me, that was one of the big highlights of the show. And, you know, we can't go too much further than that, because one of the reasons I was looking forward to, because I was like, I don't know what is like out there, you know, and not just from what people are saying, but just what I speculate. So I don't even want to speculate too much more, because they purposely left so much out of this making of documentary about the music. But we can, like I said, that NerdSync episode and stuff, like Ron pretty much says it, and I feel like if he said it, he's either allowed to or he doesn't care. It's out there, but it's what, like maybe a 15-20 minute video.
Wow, fucking remember. We shot that thing like 6 years ago.
Right. But that one goes in depth about the actual writing of the song that they did not do here. If you were itching for that, there is and our Scott Nicewonder did a fantastic job of making it visually exciting. Like it could have been part of this assembled show. And I'm a little bit biased because I wrote it. I wrote the script.
It helps. Yeah.
But Scott does a great delivery and had great animations and stuff. But yeah, so whatever they left out about the song is in that video, but also what Larry said, like, matches and tracks with the information we've heard from like the Leewalds and Ron and everything. So at least there's that. But yeah, it was bizarre that the Newton brothers weren't even talked about. I wonder if someone just decided, like, well, that's a thread that we would kept getting
if you start pulling it, I think that's part of the issue. I will say I did like seeing Avi Arad in there, because I think something that a lot of people forget is Marvel was in dire straits in the 90s. Like going into the early 90s, they were getting their asses handed to them. And it really was the investment of Avi and Toy Biz that helped turn the company around, which eventually led to the licensing for the movies and all that kind of stuff that made Marvel the juggernaut that it is, you know. And it had been forever since I had seen Avi in anything, but I was glad to see like him just kind of like chilling old rich dude with all like his really expensive statues and shit behind him. Like there was something about it. I was like, yeah, if I had a career like Avi's when I'm at that age, that's how I want to be. I want to be in a beanie cap and a t-shirt. Fuck it.
An X-Men t-shirt looked like from the Old Navy.
And then in a Spider-Man beanie. And fuck it, man. You got to be a part of some of the coolest stuff to define all of our childhood into our adulthoods. Be comfortable. Fuck it.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see him. I don't even remember if I've even seen him before, because you just see his name as a boilerplate on so much Marvel stuff. It almost reads to me as like a corporation more than like a person.
Right.
So when they had the lower third say Avi Arad, I was like, oh shit, this is a guy. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
And then just for transparency, my former boss, Matt Edelman, worked with Avi back in the 90s as well. Nice. Some people know Matt's name because there were a few YouTube documentaries that talk about how Matt and Avi, because of the Spider-Man cartoon, that eventually led to the green light of the Blade live action stuff.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Some of the other like highlights though that I did enjoy were they like kind of did a section on the legacy cast and a section on the new cast.
Yeah, I kind of appreciated the separation of the cast for purposes of history, because as much as this is called the making of 97, like 40% of it was the making of the animated series.
Yeah. I did not know that George Buza was the only one familiar with the X-Men before. That was new information. It was really fun.
George, to me, reminds me of if Beast went back to human form and had been, you know, in his 50s, 60s, etc. That's honestly how I felt about him. Is he's he's the human form of Beast to me, just like how he presents himself and like, so well spoken and chill and a little bit gruff. There was something about him that was like, God, you couldn't have found a better person to be that character.
And I loved his story about how he knew it was X-Men when he read it.
Yeah.
And then he knew he wanted Beast because he said he was a heavier set kid when he was younger and he would get picked on. But if he would defend himself, since he was bigger, he would be blamed for it. And I was like, wow, that is just like an interesting version of the story that, we talk a lot about other marginalized groups of people and stuff always getting blamed for things when they're just defending yourselves or like having normal rights. But it's really interesting for like a white Canadian guy to also have that version. I didn't think about that. And he's right. Like if you're a bigger kid and a bunch of other kids pick on you and they look at that group, they'll be like, oh, it's your fault. And so he said that, he related with Beast because you could have to use his words, be calm. But then I loved, he was like, and violence was his last resort. But when he did.
We got some also great moments from Cal, who sadly I've not had the pleasure of meeting in person yet either. And it's so funny with a lot of the classic voice actors, like when you see them in interviews, because they'll be talking in their normal voice and then literally it'll just go from one line to the next of seamlessly transitioning into their character's voice. Also, there was a line that he gave that I don't know if I missed it in the episode, in which I feel like is hard to do considering I rewatched every episode 3 times. But it was basically saying, like, you held back against the dock. We can't have that. You need to aim for go for the kill with Magneto.
I was wondering about that.
I don't remember that line being in the episode. Please tell me in the comments if I'm wrong and where that was. But that felt like a line that got cut.
Or... Man, you wonder when they filmed this assembled?
Got the vibe that all those were just their actual VO recordings and it's been pieced over time.
Oh, really? Okay, so I was actually wondering if those were just reshoots because they were dressed way too nicely to be in recording sessions, but...
I don't know, man. I from my experience being in person with Lenore at multiple events and seeing her places, that's how she is. She's not going to roll up in sweatpants to a recording studio.
I did appreciate.
I can't speak to the others, but Lenore,
I did appreciate 2 things. Well, everything about Lenore, but 2 specific things in this was that she was wearing her homemade X-Men earrings, which is awesome in the Disney show. Go Lenore. But also she said me and my brother's favorite line. You look about as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. And she did it perfectly, which goes back to what we talked about in the very first episode, 97.
About how we think it was voice direction, which was why the tone was what it was in those early episodes. Yeah.
Same with Cal, too, because he nailed everything in that special.
And then it was really only one of the early lines was one of the ones that we were just like, that seemed like his voice had aged a little bit.
Yeah,
I agree. I thought it was interesting. They talk with Chris Potter specifically.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, it used to be Gambit, now is doing Cable. But there was no like address as to why it happened. And obviously, like, we love AJ and we're thrilled for him because he's a friend of the show that he gets to be Gambit. But it was like, it just felt weird that they were like, hey, we're going to do this new thing with you, but we're not saying why in the thing. It feels like there's a line that gets cut. And I know obviously they're not going to say that when they're recording it, but it's still just like, but why did you guys switch him? Like, now I'm genuinely curious. What was the decision on that?
Yeah, I wonder if he just didn't hit it the way they wanted him to.
From an interview I saw posted, he was approached about being Cable rather than him auditioning for Gambit and it's switching. And I don't know if maybe the article didn't have full context as to everything, but there was something where Chris Potter was approached initially around Cable. And I don't know if it's maybe because the dude's voice is like literally perfect to the live action Cable.
And this is one of the things that I brought up sometime before Remember It. I mentioned to you, and I can't remember if it was just in person or on the show or both, but basically, oh, hey, I wonder if seeing who was replaced and who wasn't for the still living cast members is going to show us who dies in the show and who doesn't. And obviously, we found out Gambit was one of them. Maybe that has something to do with it. Like, they're like, well, Cable's going to be around for a while. If you want a job, maybe not Gambit.
I don't know anymore.
But then Cal looks like he's having the most fun out of all of them.
Dude, he is so just like getting into it with the motions of his body and stuff like that as he's going. Like, if you're going to be a voice actor, like, God, he just embraces the character. I love it.
Yeah, I love Adrian, the voice of Nightcrawler, was saying it was his very first animated gig. and which crazy, by the way.
Well, and like most of them were like, oh, I'd acted before, but I'd never done VO. Like, that's the craziest thing about that original cast.
And he said that he got in the studio with Cal, and he saw Cal doing all the motions, and he's like, oh, so I'm actually still supposed to act with my whole self. And I think my favorite moment of Assembled at all was when they, obviously Alison Seeley Smith, I'm biased for, but she had the perfect interview because she was like, I was doing Shakespeare. She even said it like that, Shakespeare.
Oh yeah, she said it like a Shakespearean actor. Yeah.
Like, I was doing stage plays, and like I did this audition, and I didn't know what I could bring to like a superhero. And then they said she was a queen. She's like, I can do queen. I was like, yes.
There was a reason I was waiting for you to just bring up the Storm stuff because I didn't want to step on your toes for it.
I love that. I might make that a ringtone. And then Allison brought up something that I didn't know about the shows. I guess at least the Canadian cast, they recorded in the original studio from the 90s.
I didn't know that either. But I mean, I guess it makes sense. If you have a great studio with now the ability to teleconference in the people as you're recording to do like high quality audio, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm assuming the other guys, since most of them are out here in LA, did it like in Burbank or something.
Or, I mean, in LA, people have home recording studios at this point.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if, it was just like in their closets and stuff?
I mean, when we interviewed AJ, we saw his booth, so it's entirely possible.
I won't name them out loud, but there's a friend of mine that was a VFX artist on one of the bigger Marvel movies, and they edited that in their sister's living room through the pandemic. So anything's possible, you know? Who knows?
I did also appreciate the mention of David Hemblum, who was the original voice of Magneto, who had passed away, as well as Norm Spencer, who was the voice of Cyclops, who had passed. But again, there are certain moments that are just like a little bit weird that are not addressed, like Catherine Disher, who was originally Jean and now is Val Cooper, doesn't get mentioned, but we get a full interview with Jennifer Hale. We had no mention of Jubilee at all between Holly or Allison. It was like, and yes, I get it. For time, this thing could be 5 hours if you include anything, but it's just kind of like, I wish everybody could have gotten their moment, you know?
Maybe they'll do one of these for season 2.
I'd imagine.
I don't know anymore because these Assembled, I know there was one for What If, but that felt like they had to because it was part of that MCU-ish connection, but they didn't do an Assembled for like I Am Groot or anything, you know?
I'm looking up the list of all the Assembleds because I candidly haven't watched like any of them. So
this Assembled was a little different than I'm used to. And granted, all the Assembleds have a little bit of their own tone. I like the ones that are a little bit more narrative. So sometimes the Assembleds are more of their own like little show. This I know I mentioned to you before we watched it that the Assembleds typically are like DVD extras with a little bit higher production value and then kind of put together. This is probably the epitome of that. This literally felt like a bunch of featurettes just watched in order.
So I would wager they will, if only for taking Loki as the example, because they did a making up for Loki season 1 and another one for season 2.
Yeah. So hopefully maybe some of the people who didn't get to be seen on camera, and even if they don't want to talk about the taboo stuff, at least show
give people their moments.
Show Alison Cord, show Holly Chow, and so because they were great. Isaac wasn't on there.
Isaac wasn't on there. JP wasn't on there. I hate listing off like who wasn't on there because I also get it. I used to time TV for WWE, and we would have a roster of people that would show up to an arena and not get them on a live show. And it sucks when you get left off of stuff, but you're also that valuable commodity of time is the hardest thing to budget when it comes to creative content. So, and don't get me wrong, there are certain things that I do believe were choices and certain things were just logistics. And I think any voice actor who was left off, I do not think it was anything intentional.
It might have even just been scheduling, this town, like everybody's working and stuff. Because this show was done like over a year ago at least. So like everybody... even George mentioned it about 92. He was like, I was on another show, and Chris Potter said I was on Kung Fu with David Carradine. And I had to do my lines during lunch, which is also bonkers. And Alison Seeley Smith said that her only day off from Shakespeare was Mondays, so she would drive us like bonkers, man.
I'm not gonna lie, so I've not had the opportunity to, especially from the new cast, I've not gotten to meet Ray. Ray feels like he has the most Cyclops ass energy ever. And I think aside from the voice match, just the energy of Ray is fucking perfect.
Yeah, he got on screen and I was like, I hadn't seen him before. And then the more he talked, I was like, yeah, that was the right choice.
Yeah, that's Cyclops. Yeah.
Because even everything about him is like, nope, don't know X-Men, don't care. They hired me. They said match him. I did it. This performance is dedicated to him. I was like, wow, that was somehow both like very reverent, respectful, stale. It was like so many things at one time, but that was great.
Yeah. And he did also mention Meredith, who is the head of vocal direction, which hasn't come up a lot during the season in our conversations, but when I was at the WonderCon panel for X-Men 97's cast, everybody talked about Meredith, and some people literally use the phrasing of like the best voice directing talent that I've ever worked with professionally. Also, Ray, I believe, had said that he has never seen this level of time and care for any other animated production he has ever been a part of.
I mean, that makes sense because, especially if he wasn't familiar with this series and stuff growing up, he's like, you will be crucified if you don't nail this.
Yep.
And also, everybody's jobs are on the line. It felt like the whole like 90s show all over again because the Leewalds brought up Margaret Lesh and, you know, how she famously put her job on the line to get this whole show greenlit.
I am so happy that they shared that story because I really don't think that unless you've read the Leewalds book or listened to us say it on a podcast, how many people actually know that fact. Like, this woman literally put her entire career on the faith of this season working.
Yeah, and Eric Lewald even saying in Assembled, Hollywood didn't think that people wanted to watch superhero movies, which is hilarious to think about in the context of anything from, 2012 on or something? Or when did Iron Man come out? Was that late 2000s?
Fuck, you're putting me on the...
Wow, yeah, let me look it up.
It was like 2010, I want to say. Let's say 2010.
So right around there, yeah.
Yeah, because...
Oh, wow, 2008.
Jesus.
Yeah, but even then, like, this think about this. That's even worse because it wasn't that long. If you think about like a little over a decade later, like what that is Hollywood.
I mean, both companies, major things. Yeah, no, absolutely. I also do like how they had to slightly like gloss over Pride of the X-Men too.
They were like, oh, they tried it in the 80s. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, late 80s, but it was still the 80s. And there were members of the team from the animated series team who were a part of Pride. It was written like a G.I. Joe cartoon as opposed to what we got that is why it worked. So
I think Larry had name dropped Will a little bit, who worked on Pride with, but like once. And it was like the little, okay, like this, that was part of it, but we're not gonna dwell on Pride of the X-Men.
The less said, the better. I mean, that's literally the one piece of X-Men media that is not on fucking Disney Plus right now. So
yeah, I don't even know who owns that.
Oh, the internet at this point.
Right, it's YouTube owns it, or not YouTube, not YouTube the company, but YouTube the community.
Yeah, the royal YouTube.
Yeah. Another thing that I really appreciated, because I had speculated on this when the trailer first dropped. I remember on our special episode we did about that, I was like, wow, even though we'd seen other stuff, I was not expecting to see the VHS filter and everything. And I use filter kind of as shorthand for me not knowing how animation works. And then in this show, they were like, yeah, we had this process, which was essentially a filter. Like, thank you.
Yeah, like the motion shaking of the jet and stuff like that. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And there was one shot that I saw that did confirm that all the animation did happen. Even though it was drawn animation, it happened on computers.
Yeah.
So sadly, we're not going to be able to buy animation cells at this thing. So
yeah.
There was mention that the animation studio that had done this had done a lot of anime specific work.
Studio Mir. So they were like, yeah, they do a lot of anime work. I'm like, okay.
That explains so much of the action sequences.
Emmy said that they wanted to respect what you remember of the show and not how it accurately was, which is like always a good way to go because nostalgia always has different goggles. And then someone else had added on to that. Yeah, so we respected the original nostalgic visual of the 2D plane for 80% of the show. And then 20% was like being able to, like the Storm first person perspective as she's flying through the canyons. Yeah. She's like, we jumped out of that for emotional effect. And I was like, wow, you guys found like that ratio of like how to use that. Because they did it not just in action sequences, but they also figured out where they could do that in character driven scenes. Oh, okay. Yeah, specific. Gotcha. Yeah. No. So it was such good decision making all around. Like that whole dream team
Yep. So, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway I have from this is we tried to keep a lot of this episode focused on what stood out to us, but we also didn't want to steal the stories from the people who are telling them. Like, me telling the story of Lenore's audition is never going to be as powerful as Lenore sharing it. So everybody should go watch this if they haven't yet. Definitely do that. We just wanted to give our thoughts on it for people. Rod, before I start closing us out, any final thoughts about Assembled?
Yeah, actually, my funny thing was I was rewatching it right before we got on this call. My actual personal takeaway from it was I was kind of encouraged by how many people, both in the original show and this show, the current show, were unfamiliar with what they were doing. The original cast, all but George, was like, I don't know what the fuck this was. And then in the new show,
all these Shakespearean Canadian actors.
Yeah, because I joke about it, but I'm actually serious. Most of the time, I don't know what I'm doing in my own career. Like, I work in music out here in LA, and then half in YouTube and TikTok and stuff. But people who don't know me just assume I'm an expert or something. Like, when my TikToks are popping off, people are like, asking for advice on this. I'm like, I'm gonna be clean with you. I don't know. Like, when it worked, I just kept doing it, and so it makes me feel affirmed and better about where I'm at. Where where Cal Dodd went from I don't know who the fucking X-Men were to now he is physically embodying Wolverine whenever when he's out. I think even one of his interviews he said he had to turn the mic off because he was staying in character outside of the takes.
Oh, it wasn't an interview. It was when they were doing the recording sessions, and he would literally cut people off.
So that was my takeaway. Even though I had the criticisms about there was a lot of stuff that obviously legal cut out and things, I still like the human stories we got, even the ones we'd heard already. And for the general public, if you're not familiar with how Hollywood works and stuff, or you're not here in LA, I would recommend watching it because you get to hear Lee Wald's stories from their mouths with good makeup and lighting, which they totally deserve.
Yep. And Larry get his spotlight.
Yes.
And, I mean, obviously, I can't not be a little biased, but seeing AJ is the first of the new cast who's revealed on camera as a character and everything too.
Yeah, that was really cool. And you get to hear his story too. He, even though he told the story on here, which you should have heard first.
Yep. He also had parts of it that he didn't give us either, so he gave new stuff on there. So.
Yeah, okay, to his credit, he had to tell the story probably 300 times. Yeah. We heard us tell it Scum and Villainy and who has how many other podcasts and interviews.
Yep, yeah. I want to say one thing I did love about the edit is they did a great job of inserting quotes and moments and lines from the show. And I'm not going to do it immediately, but I am obviously going to do a rewatch of all the episodes just from pure enjoyment when I'm emotionally ready to do that. And God, there are some of those speeches and character moments from those early episodes that are so good. But by the time you got to the last episode, you almost forgot about them because of how good the season kept building.
Yeah. I watched another breakdown channel on YouTube talk about it, and someone mentioned that very first introduction to the team in the first episode when they all jump out of the Blackbird, and one of the hosts was like, wait, is that in the, because she hadn't watched the last episode yet, she's like, that in the last episode? I was like, no, that was in the first one. She's like, oh my god, that's right, that felt like a lifetime ago, because the show has just changed over 10 episodes. So, yeah, totally.
All right. Well, to wrap this up, like Rod and I mentioned, we're going to have a few weeks where posting is going to be lighter, most likely. Obviously, if we get interviews with the cast and stuff like that, that may change that. But we're going to take a slight hiatus. We will be back. We'll post about when we're back, and we're going to get back into X-Men Evolution. But we are going to take what more creators need the freedom to do, which is a mental health break.
Yeah, especially after this show.
Especially after the emotions of this show. Because we loved every part of it, but it is exhausting to do this, and more people just... sometimes you have to step back because not to say we're running on empty, but damn, we're tired.
Yeah, I had to drive in Hollywood traffic today. I mean,
that alone, yeah, fucking A, Rod.
But I would encourage. I'm assuming. I mean, I know there's a lot of you that have been here since literal day one of over 100 episodes ago now or something.
Over 100 now.
But for some of you that just joined in for 97 or something, there's the evolution that we haven't finished yet, but we're going to, and then the original series, obviously. Or if you want to kind of pick and choose, I feel like one of the highlights is the episodes we got to do with the Lee Walds for the finale.
Graduation days. I talk about that with my people who are like professional interviewers and stuff like that. I'll share this anecdote. I'm good friends with Greg Miller from Kind of Funny. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. Greg is known to be incredibly emotional, especially on podcasts and stuff like that. And when he ended Podcast Beyond, like his final episode, he started crying from it. I shot Greg a note after we did the Lee Waltz thing, and I was like, dude, I basically had my Greg Miller moment. He's like, why? I was like, I was holding back tears as I was talking to the Lee Waltz about Xavier's goodbyes.
Yeah, so this is a great episode. And then we had a bunch of other great guests and stuff. You know, you can hear me and Wally originate the Cyclops semen joke. And
I love that I give this emotional moment, and then you literally followed up with that of all fucking things.
Is the balance. You know, we had Carlos Nostalgic Latino on here.
We had Michelle Waffle on.
Michelle Waffle, a couple Joes.
Max No Sleeve.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a couple Joes.
We had Sean from the Nanny podcast. Yeah. So lots to look back on, even just here if we want to go back and catch up. Yeah. But we'll be back in no time. I mean, this is that we have some stuff lined up that we don't want to jinx by saying right away, but I think it's going to be kind of exciting coming up.
Rod and I have discovered it's not booked until it happens, let alone if you say it's booked. And the ongoing joke is that Shawnee was supposed to be on about 55 episodes ago at this point, I think.
Yeah. No, it's all fun. Luckily, the show is on no shortage of drama and secret babies, so we should be good.
Yeah, and we just got out of the high school era of evolution, so we'll see.
Babies are possible. For
the last time of season 1 of X-Men 97, thank you for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post about this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts. Just keep going, Rod. And CastBox. I was going to end it with a remember it, but I think I just need to open another Guinness.
Nice.